So I'm Tracy Dudley, and I'm the director of Changing the Game at Eyes on Me. Primarily, I work with women that have been very trapped in a cycle of addiction, domestic violence, and abuse. Some are actually victims of human trafficking. Others are very much nurturing their pain and their hate and a drug addiction, and they're very caught up in a life living in motels and cycling in between jails, treatment facilities, and back to the streets. I was actually abandoned at birth. I was adopted and raised by my grandparents. I grew up in a very unhealthy environment emotionally. My adoptive dad was very intimidating, very overpowering. And so I didn't learn until many years later that was those experiences created a lifelong issue with trauma in my life. I started kind of going to bars and clubs and things like that, probably when I was about 19 years old. But things took a real devastating turn, probably when I was about 23. And that's when I started really kind of learning, seeking out places. And then, we call it being stuck. What happens is you start visiting these places and there's these players in these motels in the life, right? But you still kind of have one foot in and one foot out. And then you become very much a part of that world. You become a major player in that world. So it literally did get to a point where I honestly didn't care if I lived or died. It doesn't matter anyway. And so I just think that it was just a place of, I don't know what's better than this, but I know I don't want this. And so what changed for me was setting still long enough for that place, for those changes to begin to take place, for my mind to become healthier, for me to start seeing that the very things that I was doing as a form of survival, there was actually a skill set in there. And actually, it was God that taught me. It was like, Tracy, there's things with my grace that you've walked through. Those things they can be valuable in the kingdom.
In 2004, I was rapping quite a bit. As a young rapper, I went many places, and I went to this place called Centacor, which is a treatment facility for those recovering from drugs, alcohol. That's where I first met her at. And then she got a job with a ministry that I went to prisons with, called Cool Ministries, Christ Over Our Life Ministries. And she began working there. And so I would go to prisons with them, and I would always see Tracy, and we just became friends way back then in 2003, 2004. Tracy started communicating with me about kind of going through a difficult season with work and employment, things like that. And I would pray with her, and, we helped her out a little bit. And then we got this grant from Goya to engage in anti-sex trafficking and exploitation. And I was like, Dennis, we should talk to Tracy.
The opportunity that was presented to me was, hey, we want to develop a program working with victims of human trafficking and those that are caught up in a life of, sexual exploitation. And so Trey and I actually sat down, and we just kind of tossed around some ideas. I was like, man, changing the game. It's like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Let's do it.
We knew how to disciple and mentor, people from prison, ex-gang members, youth, families, but we had never touched that area. In order to touch that area of sexual exploitation, you have to know some things. And I personally was never trained in that. But then God sent Tracy, and it's just our season now.
So with their guidance, started kind of putting things based on just some of my lived experience, some of the things I've seen work over the last several years, in working with individuals, coupled with things that Eyes on Me was already doing.
Tracy has that piece down where she knows how to relate to these women. She's very knowledgeable of what these ladies are dealing with because she was in that life. The zeal and the energy, as well as the education and the knowledge that she shares with us, allows us to kind of do our part and be able to provide some leadership structure and development.
And the strategy is prevention, intervention, stabilization, and leadership. Some of the services would definitely be, going into the high-risk motels, setting up shop, if you will, converting those into resource stations, providing on-site case management. And we do this purposely within walking distance of our mission centers. So that way it's like, look, when you're ready, you want to do something different, I am right down the street. The idea is for someone to move beyond intervention and move into stabilization. So that could look like helping them get into a treatment facility, a safe house, while engaging in services that we have here at our mission center. At our God's Point location in Greenspoint, we offer a support group every Friday at 1:30. Block parties and outreach happen throughout the week. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved, and that's not including the Diamond program, which is our prevention program, and that's in several of our communities as well.
We're already seeing girls come off the street. We're already seeing our services expand into multiple communities to meet the needs because it's everywhere. Sex trafficking is everywhere. Sexual exploitation is everywhere, all over our city. It's one of the stats that we really don't need over our city. And I'm thankful that now Eyes on Me has a champion that's building up an army to go frontline, face to face, at the motels, on the streets, and say, hey, we love you. We have a way out for you, because we know there's no fulfillment in that life. And when they do, they'll have someone to call.
I believe my purpose is to help women discover for themselves that all of these things that they have struggled with their whole life, these things about themselves, these perceptions that they have, to weed through and just really see that who you were way back then, that one that for whatever reason you tried to hide her, that girl holds your power. It's cool to go out there and do all of these things. It's great, it's fun, it's cool. But when one of those women get it and they really start standing up and really even coming to terms with reality, because the reality is you don't always get your kids back if you've been gone for a long time. You're not going to be able to turn the clock back. But for someone to really stand up in their purpose and then be able to go and reach other people, I think that's real special.